Thank you everyone for joining today's event. First of all, let me request all of you, if you're not speaking, to put your microphones on mute. That includes everyone, the organizers as well. And you know, above everything, this is an exciting talk. We call it the Leadership Talk Series. It was formulated by the Center for Enterprise and Society, which is a think tank based out of ULAB. It's a rather unique think tank because it does research on business and entrepreneurship mostly, and some social research as well. We've been, doing research for since 2012. So it's been a while. Amader ei talke, the partner is Dhaka Tribune. It's been broadcast live on the Dhaka Tribune Facebook page. And our speaker is none other than someone we're all very proud of, Ms. Sonia Bashir Kabir. From her Microsoft days or from her association with other leading global powerhouses like Dell, or local powerhouses like Arma Technologies. But Sonia has now moved on, and she has her own organization that does investments in tech companies and tech startups, not just in Bangladesh, but in the region. So it's an exciting transition, I think, that would be illuminating for us to hear about and learn about. And I think one of the things we try to do through these talks is basically position a lot of views on leadership, because as we know, leadership is an integral part of growing, scaling business, or any organization really, or any setup. So without further ado, I would like to first invite Professor Imran Rahman. Professor Imran Rahman is the Dean of the ULAB School of Business and the Special Advisor. And Professor Rahman can invite Kobo to introduce the speaker and read out maybe an excerpt of her very illustrious biography. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very, very much, Sajid. And a very good morning to our illustrious speaker today, Sonia Bashir Kabir. And also a very good morning to all those who are joining this leadership talk, either through Zoom or through the Dhaka Tribune or ULABian Facebook pages. So we had to work a bit to summarize Sonia's extensive CV, because she's really changed the landscape of IT in Bangladesh. So let me give it a shot. Sonia Bashir Kabir is the founder and chair of SKK Tech Ventures. This is a venture capital company. She's one of the most prominent business leaders in Asia in tech, startups, and venture capital. And as recently there was a news that she is on the board of, if I'm not mistaken, was it Dell Asia? She will say a bit more about that herself. So we are so proud that she represents Bangladesh in various international forums. Sonia has served as the managing director for Microsoft Bangladesh, Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan, and Laos. And before that, she was the country director of Dell Bangladesh. Sonia Kabir was the first female leader to receive the ICT Business Person of the Year award at the Daily Star ICT Awards in 2019. And she was one of the 10 recipients of the prestigious Microsoft Founders Award in 2016. That was awarded by Bill Gates himself. So apart from that, I'm privileged to be a very close friend of Sonia and her husband, Itisham Kabir. So imagine my pleasure that we finally got Sonia to participate in the ULAB's Leadership Talk Series. And so over to you, Sajid, and please invite Sonia to give a talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sonia, maybe have you kindly start your talk now. And so just to remind everyone, the format of this talk is such that Sonia will deliver the talk for about 40 to 45 minutes. And those of you who have questions, please note them down or just message the questions on the chat window to me, and I will address them towards the end of the main component of the talk. Over to you, Sonia.
Thank you very much, Sajid. Thank you, Imran Bhai. Thank you so much. I'm very deeply honored to be invited to speak at this event arranged by ULAB. So I don't really want to talk a little bit about myself, because Imran Bhai has given a very good summary, and I would like to just begin talking about the topic that we want to discuss today. It's leading with digital transformation. As most of you know, my background is in technology. I lived 20 years in Silicon Valley, and I worked for tech companies in the Valley and continued working in Bangladesh. So one of the things I would like to highlight is that while I was working in Silicon Valley, it was always my passion to come back to Bangladesh and have our own Silicon Valley. I saw what happened in the 80s. It was the rise of personal computing. Then it was the rise of the dot-com. It was called the dot-com boom. We also saw the dot-com bomb. So I witnessed all of that. And it was a personal passion that when we moved back to Bangladesh, finally, me and my husband agreed together at the same time after living there for 20 years that we would move back with our family. And I came back with three things that I really wanted to be pursuing. One was to embrace technology as a nation, and that was my goal that I finally am getting a chance to work on. Second was to empower the rural communities. And the third was to engage women in technology. So this was my personal goal. And when I moved back to Bangladesh, I realized, having lived 20 years in Silicon Valley, I actually don't know anything about our country, how businesses run, how people operate, how they do engage professionally. So it took me a while to go through the route. I started working with Amra Technologies, and then I continued working from Amra to Microsoft and Dell. And it was in 2019 that I was ready to actually pursue my passion. As you know, my career started in Silicon Valley. It actually started working for VCs, the venture capital, before I moved to the deep tech industry. So I did have a little bit of that exposure. And today I would like to share with you about leadership, about technology, about startups, and about venture capital. So that's how I would structure the rest of the 35, 40 minutes. Before I begin, there's one word I like to spend some time on, and it's inclusion. And everybody usually thinks inclusion is about gender. And to me, it's actually not about gender. It begins in the decision-making process. So when we are growing up in our families and we see that a lot of decisions are being made at the family level, how inclusive is that? And the reason I bring this out is because I've seen from my experience that those who are part of the family decision making from their childhood, who are either invited to be part of the decision making or who directed or take it upon themselves to make an opinion, are the leaders that we see today who are emerging because they care about a decision being made and voicing their opinion. So the inclusion in the decision-making process is very important from the early childhood years, because that's when you can see how a leader is emerging. And then from that, I want to bridge this to the founder's DNA that I spend a lot of time talking with the startups or the aspiring startup entrepreneurs, that you must have the founder's DNA to be running a startup, to be a leader in doing all of this. And then that's where I will spend a little bit more time at the end of the session today. So if I was to begin saying that, we've talked about decision-making process because a leader has to make decisions. I think that is the utmost important criteria. And then if you are going to be a game-changing leader in a technology industry where things are happening very fast, you have to care, and that the word empathy comes in. Everybody knows about the word, how powerful empathy is. But then, so let's begin on starting with technology. We know is an enabler. It is changing the world. Post-COVID, I keep repeating myself, but that's something I'd like to share today as well, that the acceleration of the digital transformation with COVID was a boon for the tech industry. Like we're today meeting in Zoom, we would have done this in person, right? So we all know that. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But with that, having had that, the transformation that actually happened because of COVID, I think the startup entrepreneurs who are aspiring or who are already entrepreneurs listening today, you couldn't have been positioned in a better time than now to be in Bangladesh, to think of starting a company and to make it big. Because the reset, the landscape has been reset. Our economy is doing very well. International venture capitalists are looking at our country. We're performing above what other countries are doing. So the timing is perfect. Now what we need to do is is get our game right, get the story right, so that we actually ride the wave for the next 3 to 5 years and show to the world what Bangladesh can do, what our youth can do with technology, and how successfully we can digitally transform. So one of the first things that I'd like to begin the conversation with startup ecosystem is that digitizing something is not solving a problem. A lot of startups come to me and they say that আমি এটা digitize করে দিব, এটা আগে এটাকে automate করে দিব. That's just a process. A startup must have a product. A process can never be a product. So the first thing is, when you're in the digital transformation, am I just automating a process? Am I part of a process, or am I a product? You must have a product. Startup, we must know that if you're not making money, it's very difficult to be. So the four things that are really important for a startup leader is that, what is your product? How will you solve? Can you hear me? Is the connection okay? Thumbs up.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Just let me know if you don't hear me. Then I'll try to adjust my Wi-Fi. So basically, in a startup, we're saying that what is your product? Most important thing is how will you do it, and then what, how, where, when. But what is important for VCs right now? What we say is the why. So why are you doing what you are doing? And that we've noticed that is something none of us really spend a lot of time. So if you say it's about making money, it's not interesting enough. If you say it's my passion, it's not interesting enough. So the word that I am very passionate about and I'd like to share with you is impact, right? We know what we want in Bangladesh now is impact techpreneurs. That means you solve a problem for the masses, and then you're also an entrepreneur. You're not just an entrepreneur, you're not just an impactpreneur, because I'm a tech biased person. I would say you look at technology to solve your problems and be an impact. The other thing is that when VCs are looking at countries like Bangladesh and talking to our startup people, they ask this problem: what is your total addressable market? We have a population of 160 million people. Our population is our strength. If from a technology point of view, from a venture capital point of view, both very heavily male-dominated industries, I am happy to be a part of and say that our population is our strength, because imagine the amount of data we have for 160 million people. Data is electricity, data is power, data is currency. So again, another message to the youth is you couldn't have been in a better time than now to be in Bangladesh, where we are slowly, COVID has taught us that some very traditional verticals like education and health had to embrace technology faster than they ever would have. So these are things that we are looking at. The other message for startups is that if you are a tech-enabled startup, you don't need a bank loan. You don't need a lot of infrastructure like the garments industry, the steel, the manufacturing, the fast-moving FMCG. All that requires a lot of infrastructure spending. What our youth are now going to go to market with is IP, or intellectual property. It is the ability to use your brains, to use your tech skills, or have a tech company to form something and go faster. And that's a little bit on the landscape of a startup ecosystem that what we are seeing. Another secret I'll share today with you is most startups think that it's very hard to find a VC. Today, I will share with you the exact opposite. Most VCs find it very hard to get a good startup to fund. So there is money, there are VCs. So we have to change the way you think, because VCs have the same problem that startups have, finding the right startup to bet on. So that's an area where I think that you have an advantage, because we've got Bangladesh has 40 million students. Imagine the power 1/4 of the population of the country can do with our demographic dividend. We talk about density dividend, but I talk about personally the data dividend because of the population. So these are some important things. Now, if I just move into a little bit from startup and VC into leading with digital transformation, one of the things we've seen that even leaders in our if you look at our big verticals like the banking industry, you look at the ministry, the government, and then you look at the telcos, and then the big family groups of businesses, everyone has had to embrace technology, but everyone is not very tech enabled or tech literate to make those. And right now, in the era of digital transformation, technology is actually driving lots of decisions that are being made. So for the youth here, it's just that you are born at a time, or this is the time where in 3 to 5 years we will see how Bangladesh is changing and taking a position in the global map. We all know that India is not expected to perform as well as Bangladesh. But India in 2010 had 0 unicorns. The unicorn is a $1 billion industry valuation for a startup. India today in 10 years has over 35 to 40 unicorns. India has received, and I think Bijon is here from Light Castle, they've done a study also, that India just received $14 billion in VC funding in 2019. I don't have the 20 numbers. And Bangladesh in the last 10 years, between 2010 to 2020, has received over $350 million. So you see what's happening, that we are underserved, and we are not on the radar. We have one unicorn in Bangladesh, but that is bKash, and then many people consider bKash to be 51% bank owned, so they don't count that as a true startup, but we count that as a unicorn. So what is it that we are doing now to be getting leaders ready for the next wave that is imminent, that is staring in the face? So it's like, firstly, you look at a problem that you can solve, you look at impact, you look at solving something that you deeply care about, you look at solving something that everybody cares about, and then you move forward. Another thing that I would really like to highlight is from my experience working in Bangladesh I first worked for a local tech company, Amra Technologies. Most of you are probably aware of it. They're the biggest ISP and the system integrators in Bangladesh. And then I moved to a multinational like Dell and Microsoft. And the learning was actually was amazing, because I come from Silicon Valley and I immerse myself in a local tech culture, and then I go into the international culture. And the first thing that I learned, most of you have heard of this phrase, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So Microsoft headquarters in Seattle, Washington, right? They say that this is how we will roll out our product, or this is how we will solve the problems of the world. Bangladesh, sitting here, we are a very different kind of dynamics in a tech adoption. We're pretty nascent in our tech adoption stage. So then we say that how is Bangladesh actually moving forward in a strategy that is set by North America? And that was the learning that we've had, that we as a country, the psyche of the customer is very different in Bangladesh than it is for the psyche of a developing country. So when we talk to startups and we're talking to leaders and leadership, it's really important to understand what are we facing. And the advantage of the youth and the advantage of the students who are listening here and aspiring entrepreneurs is that you actually just need to serve your own market. It's big enough. We have a market that is big enough to insource. We keep talking about outsource, right? And I am saying, I'm betting on insourcing. I am saying serve the people. And because we have now seen that the tap has been opened, we just need to find out where the tap has running water. So imagine if you can have an education solution, if you can have a solution for health, and if you can have a solution for farmers, these are all going to be embraced because the price of mobile smartphone is coming down. The data drive from telcos is huge. So the ingredients that are required for the recipe to make something great is there. Now is how are leaders, or how are we coming forward to promote this? A little bit on SKK Tech Ventures is, I've been an angel investor since 2017. And while I was at Microsoft, we have investments in 25 startups as of now. And one thing I realized that in Bangladesh, it is very easy for a startup to get small seed investments, and they can probably go up to $500,000 or 4 crore in multiple checks. When it comes to getting a startup to get a one big single check for $1 million, there are not any takers, right? Because first, the VC industry is nascent. The banks don't understand this startup culture that is emerging. The government is also preparing an ecosystem. So the leadership here that is required is to show our own people and help the youth, saying that, yes, this is a bet that is worth making. This is a return on investment that we can do. And that's why I'm very passionate about SKK Tech Ventures, which is our VC fund, and we are licensed, is because we want to be that game changer, to take a local startup from just being able to get seed funding to get those big checks and attract the bigger VCs that are watching us. Somebody needs to be a catalyst to say that, you know, this startup is worth investing in, and you put funds and then make it grow. And a very important thing for leading a startup is to understand that scale is key. If you cannot scale and you are continually going to be a small startup just performing, and even if you're making money, no one is interested. You need to solve the problems of millions of people. Thousands is not interesting, and that's the only way you can become a unicorn, is when you seriously are solving problems for millions of people. So SKK Tech Ventures, people ask me a lot that what can I do to get funded by SKK Tech? Our last investment was in a digital lending platform with alternative credit score. I won't go into the tech details, but I'll tell you another trick that what startups should know is, as a VC, when I listen to pitches, if you're going through a lot of PowerPoint and showing numbers, you listen to that so much, that's not exciting. I think every startup, the true leaders of startups know how to do storytelling. It's like, tell me a story, give me enough lines that I'm interested to say what goes on more. It's just like a novel, right? So most startups don't understand that. They're trying very hard to impress and saying, you know, I'm good at this, I know how to solve the problem, but there's no story. So remember that there's a product that is very important, followed by a storytelling. Tell me a story, give me a use case that I can solve the problem of Salma like this. I can solve the problem of Abdul like this. That's a use case. So you have a solution, you've identified a total addressable market. Your share of wallet of that market may be small, but identifying a problem that affects the masses and saying, this is the total addressable market, I'm creating impact, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it, and then why do you want to do it? Please spend a lot of time, because that's something that none of us spend a lot of time reflecting on. The why is part of your storytelling. When you tell your story, tell us something no one else does. Everybody says the same thing. The 2-minute elevator pitch, the traction, the revenue, the investment required, the return on investment. That's a standard formula. How do you stand out? When you listen to, like if I listen to 10 pitches a day and there one comes in, tells me a story and tells me something that is intriguing, it solves the problem, it's got empathy, it's got impact, it's got technology, 3 very important layers. Then you're standing out as a leader. Then the world is waiting for you to say, okay, how do we embrace yourself? I'm going to take a bit of a pause here, Imran Bhai and Sajid Bhai, just to do a time check. How much time do we have? Or if there are a lot of questions, we can go straight into that.
Sonia, we're doing well in terms of time. I would say we have at least 10 to 12 minutes more.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, you know, a lot of people have asked me about, you know, the leadership traits that we talk about for a startup founder. And that's something that's very hard to explain. But there are 2 things that I personally look at when we are trying to fund startups. And I learned it when I was working for a VC in Silicon Valley, and I'll share the story with you. Those who've heard me speak before, apologies in advance if you've heard it before, but when I was working for the VC, the startups would come and pitch, and then the VC, after a few startups in his pen and paper, as the CEO was walking in, he would decide whether he would fund this person or not. And it was so intriguing for me that you haven't even listened to the pitch and you are saying a yes or a no. Is that fair to the VC, to the startup founder? And his answer was, you don't bet on the company, you bet on the person. So that's why we say that the founder's DNA is very important. It's like, are you resilient? Are you persistent? Every time you fall, do you rise higher after each fall? How do you give up on giving up? What is your go-to-market strategy? Do you embrace challenges? Are you fearless? We all know fearless, courage, these are important, but dive deeper. Can you manage a financial crisis for 3 months? Can you face your employee in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I cannot pay you salary for the next 2 months, but be with me because my dream will make sure that your dream is taken care of. That's a startup founder DNA. When that person has strength, has conviction that yes, I'm going through a hard time, but I will make it and so will you. That requires a lot of confidence from within us to be able to convince the others. And then another thing I will say is those startups that survived 2020 are winners, because 2020 was a very difficult year. There was no funding, there was no customers, there was no market, there was only expenses, because either you closed shop or you continued running, you pivoted, you cut expenses, but you ran and you didn't close shop. So those of you who survived 2020, you are now ready for the next wave, but the game has to be played very right. And that's where a lot of leadership abilities, a lot of leadership is going to be required. Another thing that I would really like to highlight is when we have startup founders who are trying to solve problems, who are trying to raise money, who are trying to sell their solution, they really need to be networking. And this is my advice to we've got a lot of successful businesses in Bangladesh. Please try to have mentors. They may not know anything about technology. They may not know anything about startups, but they know how to make money. They know how to be successful. Learn from them. I've noticed a lot of youth when I discuss that, please go talk to some big name, some big successful businessman, and their first answer is that they don't know about startups or technology. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, no matter how sophisticated you are selling a product. And the rules of selling and buying are universal. You will sell at a profit, right? Otherwise, why do you exist? One of the things that the market correction happened, and most of us saw that with the Uber and the Lyft IPO failing, that the customer acquisition story, acquiring customers at a cost and never being profitable, those days are gone. So you can't impress a VC anymore by saying, I have acquired 5,000 customers, but I will never make money and I will never be profitable. No one, a VC will say, I'm not the Gates Foundation. I'm not here to fund you to solve take care of humanity, to make money. So it's very important. That's why we keep saying that forget process, have a product. And the product technically should be like how our grandparents did business, right? If you've got something for $1, you sell it for $1.01. You do not sell it for 99 cents. What happened in the market in the startup era, people thought that you have something that's worth $1, you sell for 75 cents, you take a hit of 25 cents, that's your burn, but you've got so many customers. That theory has changed. So I'd really advise all of those who are going to pursue being founders, or who are going to pursue startups or any of your business, please remember money talks. You need to monetize. You are not here as a foundation or a charity. Your job is not to acquire customers. If you have 10 paying customers at a profit, you're better off than some startup that has 1,000 paying customers at a loss. And that's across the board. We're seeing that VCs are saying, if you don't have customer love, if you don't have traction, if you don't have low cost, high revenue, we're not interested. So that's why I'm saying that the COVID, one was the digital acceleration that really helped us. And the second was it taught back to basics business, and which is good for a country like ours because we operate very well on a certain fundamental. We don't operate with the Western theme of this customer acquisition, buybacks, cashback. It really doesn't work. It spoils our customers. And we've got a lot of customers. We can't afford to spoil them. So, I'll just conclude by saying this, that timing wise, you are in a very, very, very exciting era. I'm excited to be part of this. Bangladesh still doesn't have any technically startup unicorns. We want to see in the next 3 to 5 years, at least 5 unicorns. And I think it's possible. Anybody who's interested to get in touch with me, please do send me an email. We will share how you can contact me. But the time is now. Be a storyteller, solve a problem. Please do a self-assessment and see if you have the founder's DNA. And going back to what I started my talk with, that inclusion and decision-making process. If you are not a person who likes to make decisions, if you are not a person who thinks that that's not my problem, if you do not have a sense of curiosity inculcated in you, it is very difficult to be a leader. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Sonia. That was very educational for all of us and very edifying. So we have lots of questions, but the good news is we have some time to take those questions. So feel free to go into as much detail as you want to when you respond to those questions. So the first question I'd like to share with you actually comes from Bijan from White Castle. So Bijan has asked a question that I think is in a lot of founders' minds, especially for founders who have some runway and an established business of sorts. Bijan জিজ্ঞেস করেছে যে for a startup, how do we develop the split between winning local and going global? Should the startup have a global focus from the beginning, or does that come later?
Thank you, Bijan. I personally, and there's no right or wrong answer, so don't judge me, but I think personally, be local. That is your strength. Because you know what? People, if you are good, you will be found. If you are good, you will be discovered. Be good. And the best way to be good is be good in your home ground. So locally be successful, and then let your success take you global.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. As you know, a lot of startups that are growing struggle with this because they're wondering, because that's a market we can go and play in, or should we, that sort of thing. But it makes sense to, we do have a large market. It's not India large, but it's large, and there's still a lot to be done here. আমাদের আরেকটা প্রশ্ন এসেছে, Sonia, and you've touched upon this, and I think this is a very important topic to talk about. The question is, when you assess, let's say from the VC's perspective, right, from the buy side's perspective, when you're assessing the leadership qualities of a startup founder, are these different, or how do these qualities vary from, let's say, the qualities a mainstream business leader has? Are you looking for a greater risk-taking ability, a greater problem-solving ability, or what are these sorts of things that VCs look at?
So, basically, I'm a very big fan of hardworking people. I think a lazy genius versus an average hardworking person, I would go with the average hardworking person. So somebody who has a lot of vision and can solve problems in his head is not necessarily someone who can execute. And you know how that the phrase is that vision without execution is hallucination, right? So it doesn't really, vision doesn't impress me personally. I am looking at people who can execute. It's all about, and especially in a country like Bangladesh, it's about execution. It's a tough market to crack. So what we're looking for is people who have the can-do attitude, who say, who are embracing the impossible, who have the DNA to say, I can solve the problem, who understand that the word problem coexists with the word solution. And last but not least, those who have a solution that is needed. So there are a lot of founders we get who have a very good solution, and they're waiting, saying, Mr. Problem, please come and find me. That's not what the need of the hour is. The need of the hour is, there are problems, solve existing problems. Please don't bring sophisticated solutions and offer it and ask for a problem to accommodate you. So the kind of person we as SKK Tech are looking at is not the visionary. It's the guy who can crack and say, I can go to market, and I will, if I fail, I will rise, I will do it again. That's the kind of person we're looking at.
Thank you, Sonia. But that is, I think, the most wonderfully common sense response I've heard to that question, because সবাই বলে না, you're looking for that sparkle, or you're looking for a whole variety of things. But I think like you said, hard work will beat talent, most of the time. And that's ultimately what matters. আমাদের একটা প্রশ্ন আছে সোনিয়া from Gulfam Tasneem. She actually works with us. So Gulfam's question basically is, we have a demographic dividend, like we all know, or we talk about, and it has major benefits, of course, and challenges. So her question is, like, what should the country invest in order to reap the benefits of the demographic dividend? And I suspect she's wondering what policy changes also need to take place in order so that we can take this enormous youth energy we have and perhaps create structure to channel these energies through startups. Do we need more incubators? Do we need more universities to have curriculum on startup-based matters, or what have you, or those sorts of things? Over to you, Sonia.
Thank you. That's a bit of a difficult question for me because I'm a very private sector person. And I lived in Silicon Valley. I saw that the private sector led and the policies kind of followed to make the success of the Silicon Valley being what it is. We are lucky that in Bangladesh, the government has taken this mandate of building a very strong startup ecosystem. We have Startup Bangladesh as an initiative launched. We had the Idea Project launched. The government has allocated a lot of funds. But having said that, I mean, the government is offering a huge support, which the venture capitalists globally are very impressed with, right? Because that's saying they want success. But my advice to the youth would be, don't wait for policy to help you. Solve a problem. If you are able to solve a problem, policy will accommodate itself because the government doesn't want to the government will not ignore success. So if you are able to solve a problem, the policy will come automatically. So this is my personal view, and I'm sure many will disagree with me, but I'm not a policy expert, and I really don't spend a lot of time on policy, and I'm sure that's not a good thing to say, but that's why I don't do well with associations. I'm saying, let's hit the ground running, let's get some results, and let the results talk. Because I know that if I can do something good, policy will help me. Policy makers always look at success, right? So for the youth, my message to answer the question is, please do something. The word is do, and the word is now. Capital NOW in caps, in like biggest font possible, staring at you in the face, because this is the time, this is the right time. Those of you who will use this year to springboard and launch your startup, you will not fail, because the market correction has happened. The technology, importance has been given. Now it's how are you going to leverage those and go solve problems. Education as an industry has said, yes, I am tech enabled. Healthcare as an industry has said, I embrace technology. Financial sector as an industry has said, I need more, on the digital play. So we've got these messages. Please run, pick your choice and run with them.
Thank you. That's the sort of the call that I think is worth repeating to the youth watching. The importance of immediacy and urgency in these sorts of actioning. So আমার একটা প্রশ্ন আছে, and I think Professor Imran Rahman also has a question. So before I go to Professor Imran Rahman sir, I have a question, which is, I think about exit, right? I think about how, and this I think to some extent comes from the fact that I used to work in capital markets for different phases in my life in the US and in Bangladesh. So I think about exit, and I wonder how much exit strategies matter when investors are looking at Bangladesh. And you'd know better, of course, because, of course, under capital markets, the current leadership, not to get into policy too much, but the current leadership, I think, has taken a lot of useful decisions and practical decisions, and we're seeing positive outcomes of that. But not just capital markets, it could also be other forms of exit. So what do you think once we have created enough successful exits, we'll have more funds coming in? Or is that something that is, you see what I'm getting at? Is that a constraint to funds coming in, the fact that we still haven't created a lot of historically successful exits?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I'm asked that a lot, right? So I've been an investor from 2017, and I personally have not exited anything. I was planning some into 2020, but 2020 was a difficult year. So first, let me define exit, right? Exit can happen in very broad terms in three ways. One is it's a partial exit. So let's say if I own 20% of a company and it has 10x growth, why would I exit fully? I will exit 5% from my 20% and tell the investors I exit at a 10x return. That's all they want to see, right? The second exit is when the cap table is cleaned, a big investor comes in and the smaller investors are bought out at a very high premium. That's also an exit. And the final exit is when you're acquired, it's an acquisition, right? Like Facebook acquired WhatsApp or Instagram. So those are the beautiful exits, right? So in Bangladesh, I think we're hovering in 1 and 2, right? We have partial exits, and that's what I'll be doing this year. That startups I have investments in, and those that have done very well, I will partially release some of my shares so that I can tell investors that, look, I shook hands with my money. Money on paper is not really credible. When you say you shake hands with your money, it's like I exit and this is the return I got in cash. That's one. And the other is it is personally my job to make sure that we get a lot of big name VCs in Bangladesh. We do have some, but we definitely need more. And that's a very good exit for cleaning the cap table. And I think in 3 to 5 years, the range we've said, we will have the ultimate exit, which is the acquisition.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Sonia. We still have a few more questions, but I'm wondering if Professor Iman Rahman wants to come in now and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me, Sonia?
Gee, I can. Gee.
Yeah, I have actually 2 questions. The first is, I mean, it's regarding policy, which is the Digital Bangladesh Initiative and the A2I, and as you quite right to say, the globally, so many countries are technology at such a high priority from the top level, and so much crores and crores of taka are being thrown into it. But you know, I would ask you to kind of maybe give your opinion about how those crores of taka can be better spent, because I just have a feeling that আমরা একটু বেশি একটা কাস্ট নেট করে ফেলেছি, অনেক লিকেজেস হচ্ছে সিস্টেমে, অনেক রং রিঅ্যালাইনমেন্ট হচ্ছে, অনেক জায়গায় টাকা অপচয় হচ্ছে। সো যেহেতু আমাদের টাকা কম, we must make sure we get the greatest bang with our buck. That's the first question. Second is এটা হচ্ছে আমাদের বাংলাদেশ একটা স্বভাব যে আমরা কোনো একটা শুরু করতে গেলে এমন ঢোল বাজাই, right? Launches সময় like we've solved everything, but we don't wait till the evidence of success, and partly the media, the print and other media are responsible for this. So what would your advice be to them? Because what is happening, somebody who's really good is being overshadowed or given the same limelight as somebody who has connections and getting a lot of fear. So potential stakeholders, funders used. Who's the real deal here? These are the 2 questions I'd like you to address. Thank you.
I love your second question, Imran Bhai, because it's something very close to my heart. So I'll answer that first, and then I'll answer your first question. So your second question is about the noise and the media publicity. So I tell my startups, this is my advice to them, that be the submarine. No one should know how big you are. When you rise, you will knock everyone out. So please don't let the noise disturb you. It is very bad that a lot of noise happens. It's actually disruptive. So, and the other thing I say, I shouldn't be saying this, but I'll share it with everybody here, is like, don't be a dolphin. A dolphin is always up in the water, entertaining people, gets a lot of claps, but it doesn't do anything. Be the shark. People see a little bit of your fin and they're scared for life. So these are the messages I want to give to startups. It's like, don't worry about noise. Noise actually brings you in the radar. Why should anybody know what you're doing? I worked in Silicon Valley and it was called the stealth mode, code name. We didn't even say what the product was. We never announced the company name. We were in stealth mode, and we said the day we launch, we actually crush competition. That's a culture that Bangladesh should have. We're so obsessed with the publicity that is just short-lived and not followed by success. That's actually not good for our youth. And then, when I open Facebook and I get friend requests or LinkedIn, everybody is a CEO, everybody is a president, everybody is a founder. And I look at myself saying, I've been very very unsuccessful because it took me many years to reach that stage. And now it's like, wow, you're already a president. And, so this culture needs to change, because this false sense of success is actually damaging, because you're feeding your ego with nothing. So it's very important that we learn that let's do something quietly, make it big, let your success speak for you. Don't speak earlier than that. Success should be your spokesperson. So Imran Bhai, thank you for asking this question, because I keep telling my star, I actually named them, you're not a submarine, you're a dolphin, you need to be a shark. That's the thing. It's like the submarine is my favorite topic. It's like, imagine when it rises, how big it is. Does anybody dare to go knock a submarine? No, but nobody knows about its shape or size or strength. So that's the message to startups. Be in stealth mode, be quiet. Don't let anybody know what you're doing. This media hype and this launching, it's gone. Then you had, the first question was on we've spread the money that we have. So there are two theories, Imran Bhai, and I'm kind of conflicted in which side I'm in. So I'm in the middle, right? One is the sprinkling theory, that since I don't know what's really going to work, I need to sprinkle my lawn with every kind of seed that is possible and see what fertilizes, right? So that requires some deep pockets, because we're still not known for success. And then the second thing is a laser precision execution. That theory, that's like, okay, if I have $1, I want to make sure I spend that very wisely. Unfortunately, in Bangladesh, we're not still at a stage where you can do the laser precision execution as a government body and spend money. We're still at the sprinkling stage to see what's going to work. But I agree with you, the amount of money that the government spends, I wish we had a little bit of that to say, how can we do this? So, but speaking on behalf of the government, that they really need to figure out what's going to work and what's not. And because we're so big as a country, you require to have the ability to cast your net wide and see what fish comes up.
Thank you. Wonderful answers.
Great. So আমাদের সময় বেশি নেই, আমি just quickly একটা প্রশ্ন নিচ্ছি. This question comes from Prosper Hassan, and it's a two-part question, so maybe I'll ask both, Sonia, and they're very different questions. The first is, what are some communication failures you see in founders, and how they can improve? So this, I think, is a very specific question. The other question is unrelated, but I think it's interesting, is how do we get more people to become startup investors in Bangladesh? Become angel investors in Bangladesh. Over to you.
So communication failure, I don't know how to answer that, but I will say that just from my perspective, I like to work with people who like to do things brick by brick, inch by inch, as opposed to solving for world hunger in day one. So if a startup comes and gives me I have a solution for solving world hunger, versus someone who says, I have this vision or I have this dream and I want to do it in stages. So communication is similar. When you communicate, you actually tell us how you think, right? So when you're communicating in big bits and bobs and brick by brick and taking me to, that's communication success. Communication failure is when you've lost me at hello, right? So that's all I can say. I don't know if that answers the question.
Sure. Ji. Yeah. And the second question has to do with Bangladesh. There's BAN that Nijhor is doing, Bangladesh Angels Network, and we increasingly see people we know, other people who want to understand, can I do startup investing because I have some funds lying around and I don't think I can get a good return from a bank fixed deposit, or for whatever reason I want to invest in real estate, both who I have already, or capital markets. So is that something that we can think about? Does that help the ecosystem? And if yes, how do we create more savvy angel investors?
So, we must remember that success breeds success, right? So if we are at a very nascent stage, even though, we have the angel network, we have the Bangladesh Angels, we have other companies like mine who are trying to invest our money, but no one has seen success yet. And only when, they're saying that if you build, they will come. So it is our job to build that highway which the high-speed cars can drive on. And that's what we're doing. So the message to startups is start showing success. Because you are those who are leading with success, will be able to say that others will join, right? So if I have 5 friends who are not part of a winning startup, they will want to be. Right now, it's very difficult because we don't have, we can talk, right? We don't have numbers, we don't have success. So in order to, so the onus is always look at yourself, don't look outside. So if you're a startup, don't talk about policy, don't talk about VC, talk about your success. What have you done that will get a VC to you? What have you done that will change a policy for you? So instead of pointing fingers, and I'm also part of that team, let's look at ourselves and say, we're that little ant. If you want this, and I'll end by this, the most motivating thing on the planet for me is an ant. Have you seen an ant carry this big piece of bread? That's beauty, that's power, that's motivation. So imagine each startup needs to be like the ant, saying, I will be Atlas, I will carry the sky on my shoulders, and I will let the world know what I can do. Thank you.
Shundar Volachan Apu, this is wonderful. I hope the image stays stuck in my mind and everyone else who's watching today on Zoom and on Dhaka Tribune's Facebook page, on the Facebook page of the Center for Enterprise and Society, and on the Facebook page of the ULAB Executive MBA program. Our heartfelt gratitude to you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this for us. So we're at the end of our event, and thank you everyone for watching, for tuning in, with your questions. A big shout out again to Dhaka Tribune for hosting this with us with CES, and please follow the CES Facebook page and with the domain address search ulab.ces. That's all we have for today, and thank you and stay safe.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.